Welcome to Passions Illustrated. Before starting the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. The monotonous sound of the heart monitor was the only constant in room 407 at Portland Memorial Hospital, where Victoria Collins finally opened her eyes after 3 days of unconsciousness. The first thing she saw was the worried face of Alexander Bennett, her fiancé, who was gently holding her hand. His blue eyes conveyed relief at seeing her awake, but Victoria felt something strange, a sense of disconnection that went beyond the typical post-accident confusion. "Thank God you're awake, my love," Alexander whispered, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Victoria remained motionless, watching him with a distant expression. The man in front of her was undeniably handsome, with his aristocratic features and perfectly groomed golden brown hair, but something was wrong, terribly wrong. "What happened?" she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "You were in a car accident on Interstate 5. A truck lost control in the rain and—" Alexander stopped, swallowing. "For a moment, I thought I'd lost you." Victoria closed her eyes, trying to process the information. It was then that the memories began to come back, not those of the accident, but others older and much more disturbing, images of a summer in Newport, Rhode Island 5 years ago, the warm smile of Richard Martinez, her first true love, and the whispered promises under the starry sky of Easton Beach. "Where's Richard?" The words escaped his lips before he could stop them. Alexander froze, his face losing color. "Victoria, Richard hasn't been a part of your life for years. We've been engaged for 8 months, remember?" But Victoria was no longer listening. The memories kept coming back in overwhelming waves. The bike rides along the waterfront, the stolen kisses on the pier, the love letters hidden in her drawer. How could she forget all that? How could she move on with another man when her heart still belonged to Richard? Dr. Lauren Anderson, the neurologist in charge of the case, entered the room at that moment, interrupting the tense moment. After a series of preliminary examinations, she explained that Victoria had suffered a head trauma that could temporarily affect her recent memories. "It's common for patients to experience temporal confusion after traumas like this," the doctor explained patiently. "Her memories should reorganize over the next few days." But Victoria knew she wasn't confused for the first time in years. She was seeing everything with crystal clarity. The engagement ring on her finger, a diamond solitaire, too elegant for her taste, now seemed like an unbearable weight. In the days that followed, while recovering in hospital, Victoria began to discreetly research Richard on her cell phone. She discovered that he had become a successful architect and still lived in Newport, single. According to his social networks, her heart raced every time she saw his photos, recognizing the same gentle smile that had won her over years ago. Alexander was constantly by her side, attentive and concerned, bringing her favorite flowers and telling her about the plans for the wedding that was scheduled for 3 months from now. His every word made her feel more suffocated, more aware that she was living a life that wasn't really hers. A week after waking up, Victoria was discharged. She returned to the apartment she shared with Alexander in Portland, but every room seemed to belong to a stranger. The photos of the two of them together on the walls, the objects carefully chosen for their life together, everything seemed artificial, like a stage set for a play. One particularly restless night, Victoria found an old box in the back of her closet. Inside it, carefully preserved, was the last letter Richard had written to her. The words, although faded by time, still had the power to make her heart soar. "My dear Victoria, I know you must go your way, but know that my love for you is as eternal as the waves that kiss Newport Beach. If one day your heart calls you back, I'll be here waiting." That night, Victoria made up her mind. She couldn't go on living a lie. She couldn't go on with a marriage based on incomplete memories and choices made by a version of herself that no longer existed. In the morning, while Alexander was at work, she started packing. She left her engagement ring on the kitchen table, along with a letter explaining that she couldn't go through with the wedding. Her hands were shaking as she wrote, but her heart was at peace for the first time since she had woken up in hospital. A few hours later, Victoria was driving down I-95 towards Newport, her heart beating harder with every kilometer that brought her closer to Richard. She didn't know if he still loved her, if he would take her back after so long, but she knew she had to try. The accident hadn't just brought back her lost memories, it had given her a second chance to make the right choice. What Victoria didn't know was that the universe had other plans for her, and that the truth about her past with Richard was much more complex than her newly recovered memories suggested. A revelation awaited in Newport, one that threatened to destroy not only her romantic dreams, but also her understanding of everything she believed to be true. The drive to Newport seemed interminable as Victoria drove along I-95, her thoughts oscillating between guilt for abandoning Alexander and growing anxiety about meeting Richard again. The 5-hour drive from Portland was filled with increasingly vivid memories of their past together, each memory as clear as the day it happened when she finally reached the coastal city. The sun was beginning to set over the historic mansions of Bellevue Avenue. Victoria decided to stay at the Viking Hotel, an elegant establishment that held its own memories. It was there that she and Richard had shared their first kiss during a summer party 5 years ago. After checking in, Victoria sat on the balcony of her room, watching the harbor in the distance. Her phone kept ringing, missed calls from Alexander and worried messages from her older sister, Grace. She silenced it, knowing she needed to concentrate on what she had come to do. A quick online search revealed that Richard now worked at a prestigious architectural firm in the historic center of Newport. Her heart raced when she saw the address. It was only a few blocks from the hotel. Tomorrow. She thought tomorrow would change her life again. The next morning, Victoria carefully chose her outfit, a navy blue dress that highlighted her green eyes, the same shade she wore when she first met Richard on Easton Beach. As she walked through the cobbled streets of the historic center, her hands trembled with anticipation. The architect's office occupied a restored Victorian building, its tall windows reflecting the morning light. Victoria took a deep breath before pushing open the glass door. The receptionist, a young woman with red-framed glasses, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" "Yes, I'd like to speak to Richard Martinez, please." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but..." Victoria hesitated. "We're old friends. Can you tell him that Victoria Collins is here?" The receptionist frowned, but picked up the phone. After a few moments of whispered conversation, she indicated the stairs, 3rd floor, last door on the right. Each step seemed to increase the weight on her chest. When she reached the door to Richard's office, her legs threatened to fail her, but before she could knock the door open, Richard was standing there exactly as in her memories, albeit a little more mature. His dark brown eyes widened in recognition, and for a moment neither of them could speak. "Victoria." Her voice was a mixture of surprise and something else, apprehension perhaps. "Richard the First," she began, but words failed her. Instead, she went forward and hugged him, smelling the same sandalwood scent that populated his memories. He returned the embrace briefly before pulling away, leading her into the office. The walls were covered with architectural plans and models of impressive projects. A photo on the desk caught Victoria's eye. Richard smiling next to a brunette woman in front of a modern building. "What are you doing here?" he asked, closing the door. "I've recovered my memories," Victoria said, the words rushing out. "There was an accident, and suddenly everything came back as our time together. What we had." Richard sat down heavily in his chair, running his hand through his dark hair. "Victoria, that was a long time ago. I know, but I can't stop thinking that we made a mistake when we split up. That we should have another chance." "Stop it." Richard held up his hand, his face a mask of worry. "You don't know what you're saying. Your memories are not complete." Victoria felt a shiver run down her spine. "What do you mean? There are things about us about that summer that you clearly don't remember." He hesitated, looking at the photo on his desk. "Things that changed everything." "Then tell me," Victoria begged, leaning forward. "Help me understand." Richard was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on some distant point through the window. When he finally spoke, his voice was laden with regret. "You really don't remember Marina?" he asked softly. The name meant nothing to Victoria, but it caused a strange feeling in her stomach. "Who's Marina?" "My wife," Richard replied, picking up the photo from his desk. "Well, ex-wife now. She was your best friend that summer, Victoria. It was through her that we met." Victoria felt her world spin. Fragmented memories began to emerge. A woman laughing at a beach party, tears in the moonlight, cries of betrayal. Her stomach churned as the truth began to take shape. "No," she whispered, getting up from her chair. "It can't be. That's why you blocked out those memories." Richard continued gently. "What happened between us destroyed not only your relationship with Marina, but also your friendship with our entire group. It was you who decided to leave Victoria. You said you couldn't live with the guilt." Richard's words triggered an avalanche of memories that Victoria had buried deep inside. Now she remembered everything: the secret meetings, the lies, the devastated look on Marina's face when she found out, the guilt that consumed her until she had no choice but to flee to Portland and start again, leaving behind not only a forbidden love, but also a friendship destroyed by her own betrayal. Victoria staggered towards the door, her romantic illusions crumbling around her. The past she had idealized in her newly recovered memories was actually a very different story, a story of betrayal, regret, and consequences that she had chosen to forget. Victoria left Richard's office in a state of shock, her legs moving automatically through the cobbled streets of Newport. The revelation about Marina had unleashed a torrent of memories that now consumed her like an emotional tsunami. Fragments of the past that she had deliberately buried emerged with painful clarity, with no clear destination she wandered until she reached Easton Beach, the place where it had all begun. The sea wind whipped her face, mixing with the tears that now flowed freely. She sat down on the sand, allowing the suppressed memories to finally surface. Marina Lopez had been more than her best friend. She was practically a sister. They had met during an exchange program at the University of Rhode Island, sharing dreams, secrets, and that summer that would change their lives forever. Marina, with her infectious smile and vibrant personality, had just married Richard when Victoria arrived in Newport to spend the vacations with the couple. "How could I do this to her?" Victoria whispered to the ocean, remembering the nights when she and Richard would meet secretly on the pier, while Marina worked the night shift at the local hospital. As a resident nurse, her phone vibrated again. This time, it was Grace, her sister. After several ignored attempts, Victoria finally picked up. "Have you lost her mind?" Grace's voice was full of concern and irritation. "Alexander is devastated. He called me to ask if I knew where you were." Grace, Victoria choked on her words. "I remembered everything, not just Richard, but Marina too." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Grace had always known the truth. She had been the only shoulder to lean on when Victoria fled Newport 5 years ago. "Oh, Vic," Grace sighed. "That's why I warned you not to go back there. Some memories are better left in the past." "But why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't Alexander ever mention?" "Because you were the one who asked us not to talk about it," Grace explained patiently. "When you moved to Portland, you were so traumatized that you started to create a different version of the story. The doctor said it was a defense mechanism. Alexander met you later, when you had already rewritten your memories." Victoria closed her eyes, remembering the night Marina had discovered them. It had been during her birthday party. The cruel irony of fate. Marina had gone upstairs to get more wine in the guest room, where she found Victoria and Richard in a moment of intimacy that would destroy 3 lives. Marina's scream still echoed in her mind. "How could you, my best friend and my husband?" That very night, Victoria had packed her bags and left, unable to face the devastation she had caused. She moved to Portland, where she gradually began to rebuild her life and her memories in a way that she could bear. "I need to find Marina," Victoria said suddenly. "I need to ask for forgiveness." "Vic, don't," Grace warned. "Marina moved to Seattle 2 years ago. She's remade her life. She's happy now. Picking at those old wounds isn't going to help anyone." But Victoria was already on her feet, shaking the sand from her clothes. She had to do something to try and mend what had been broken, even if it was impossible to put all the pieces back together. Returning to the hotel, she found a voice message from Alexander. His voice was broken but calm. "Victoria, I always knew about Newport, about Richard and Marina. When we met, I realized that you had blocked out these memories, and the doctors advised me not to force the memories. I love you, not in spite of your past, but with it. Please come home. We can face this together." Alexander's words hit Victoria like a punch in the gut. All this time, he had accepted and loved a version of her that even she didn't fully know. Meanwhile, she had been chasing a romantic fantasy built on the rubble of a betrayal. That night, lying in her bed at the Viking Hotel, Victoria faced her demons one by one. The memories kept coming back, moments of happiness with Marina, the shared laughter, the plans for the future, and then the furtive glances with Richard, the secret meetings, the growing obsession that consumed them until it destroyed everything in its path. Her phone lit up with a message from Richard. "Marina is in Seattle working at the General Hospital. She deserves to know that you've recovered your memories. Maybe it's time we all found some peace." Victoria stared at the message for a long time. Seattle fate seemed to be weaving a complex web, connecting the dots in her life that she had tried so desperately to keep apart. With trembling fingers, she began to search for flights to Seattle. She didn't know if Marina would welcome her, if there was any chance of redemption, but she knew she had to try. She owed it not only to Marina, but to herself to face the full truth of who she was and what she had done before going to bed. Victoria sent 2 messages. The first to Alexander: "I need to make one last trip before I go home. There are some things I need to sort out in Seattle. Forgive me for running away." The second was to Grace: "You're right about a lot of things, but I'm wrong to keep running away. It's time to face my past, however painful it may be." Sleep was slow in coming that night, as Victoria gazed at the ceiling of her hotel room, wondering how one person could carry so many different versions of themselves. The girl who betrayed her best friend, a woman who ran away from her memories, and now perhaps someone in search of redemption. The flight from Newport to Seattle seemed endless. Victoria watched the clouds from the plane's window. Each kilometer she traveled adding to the weight of anxiety in her chest. The decision to look for Marina hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary, not just to seek forgiveness, But to finally accept the person she really was during the flight, Victoria opened her laptop and started going through old folders of photos she had saved on a forgotten drive. Each image was like a stab in the heart. Marina and her at college graduation, arms intertwined and smiles beaming. Marina and Richard's wedding, where Victoria had been a bridesmaid. Beach parties where everyone seemed so happy and innocent. A stewardess offered her a drink, noticing her trembling hands. "Are you all right?" "Yes, just difficult memories," Victoria replied, accepting a glass of water. When the plane landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, the sky was covered in a fine drizzle typical of the Pacific Northwest. Victoria rented a car and drove to the Thompson Seattle Boutique Hotel in the city center. From her room on the 10th floor, she had a privileged view of Elliott Bay and the iconic Pike Place Market. Lying in the king-size bed, Victoria finally plucked up the courage to listen to the voice messages Alexander had left. His voice was calm and understanding. "I know you need to do this, Victoria, when you're ready to come back. I'll be here not to rebuild a fantasy, but to build something real based on who you really are." His words brought tears to her eyes. How could she have doubted such mature and unconditional love? Alexander had always known about her dark past, and yet he had chosen to love her completely. The next morning, Victoria meticulously prepared for the meeting that could change everything. Finding out Marina's work schedule hadn't been difficult. A quick search on the hospital's website revealed that she was now head of the pediatric nursing department. Seattle General Hospital was an imposing complex of modern buildings. Victoria parked her rental car and sat behind the wheel for a few minutes, taking a deep breath and gathering her courage. Her handbag contained a small box of photos and mementos from that time, including the friendship necklace Marina had given her on the day of her graduation. At the information desk, a friendly receptionist consulted the system. "Dr. Lopez is in surgery at the moment, but should be finished in about an hour. Would you like to leave a message?" Victoria hesitated. "Actually, I'll wait. It's important." The hospital waiting area was full of silent stories, families waiting for news, patients waiting for appointments, lies hanging in the balance. Victoria watched it all, thinking about how Marina had built an impressive career despite the emotional devastation she had caused. After 45 minutes that seemed like an eternity, Victoria saw a familiar figure emerge from the corridor. Marina looked different. Her once long hair was now cut into an elegant bob, and her features had acquired a serene maturity. Still, it was unmistakably the same person who had been her best friend. "Marina," Victoria called softly. Standing up, Marina froze in the middle of the corridor. Her dark eyes widened in recognition, and for a moment Victoria saw every possible emotion pass through them: shock, pain, anger, and something else she couldn't identify. "Victoria," Marina replied, her professional voice maintaining a studied calm. "What are you doing here?" "There's been an accident. I've recovered my memories, all of them." Victoria took a step forward, but Marina instinctively stepped back. "I needed to see you," I needed to say. "Not here," Marina interrupted her, looking around the busy corridor. "My shift ends in an hour. Meet me in Kerry Park, you know." Victoria nodded, grateful for the opportunity. However brief, Kerry Park was famous for its panoramic view of Seattle, with the Space Needle and Mount Rainier in the background, a place public enough for a difficult conversation. The next hour was spent walking around the park, mentally rehearsing everything I needed to say. When Marina arrived, wearing casual clothes instead of her hospital uniform, she looked equally nervous. "Why now, Victoria?" Marina asked, taking a seat on a bench overlooking the city. "Why after all this time?" Victoria opened her bag and took out the small box of souvenirs. "Because I've finally understood how much I've hurt you, not just for the betrayal with Richard, but for running away, for refusing to face up to what I did." Marina looked at the box, but didn't touch it. "Do you know what was worse? It wasn't losing Richard. Our marriage was already deteriorating before you showed up. It was losing my best friend. It was the way you just disappeared, as if our years of friendship meant nothing." The tears that Victoria had tried to hold back finally spilled over. "I hated myself for so long that I created a different version of the story in my mind, one where I was the romantic heroine, not the villain who destroyed so many lives. No one is just a hero or a villain." Victoria, Marina sighed, finally picking up the box. "We all carry our own complex truths. Richard and I were already drifting apart, but you were my anchor. Your betrayal wasn't sleeping with my husband, it was abandoning our friendship without fighting for it." As the sun set over Seattle, tinging the sky with shades of pink and orange, the two women began the painful process of unearthing 5 years of hurts, regrets, and unspoken truths. Redemption, Victoria realized, would not come in a single moment of forgiveness, but in small steps of mutual understanding and acceptance of human complexity. The conversation in Cary Park stretched into the evening, with Seattle shining like a field of stars. Below them, Victoria and Marina had shared not only tears, but also fragments of their lives from the last 5 years. Marina was now engaged to a pediatric oncologist she had met at the hospital, and her professional life had blossomed in ways she had never imagined possible. "You should meet Michael," Marina said, surprising Victoria with the unexpected invitation. "He helped me understand that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who are also hurt." Victoria nodded, thinking of Alexander and how he had shown a similar understanding. "I have someone like that too," she admitted, "someone who accepted me even when I couldn't accept myself." The next morning, Victoria woke up to a message from Marina inviting her for coffee at the famous Storyville Coffee in Pike Place Market. The aroma of freshly roasted beans filled the room as the two women continued their delicate process of reconnection. "I got a message from Richard last night," Marina commented, stirring her cappuccino. "He told me about his visit to Newport." Victoria felt her face flush. "I was so lost in my idealized romantic memories that I didn't even realize how much drama I was about to unearth." "You know, it's funny," Marina leaned forward. "After you left Richard and I had long talks about what happened, we realized that you weren't the only one to blame. Our marriage was already falling apart, and somehow we used you as a catalyst for the inevitable." The revelation hit Victoria like a gentle wave. "Even so, the way I handled everything, it was terrible," Marina added with a small smile, "but we were all young and stupid. The difference is that you ran away while Richard and I had to stay and deal with the consequences." Over coffee, Victoria received a message from Alexander that made her heart squeeze. "I've booked a flight to Seattle, not to pick you up, but to be by your side while you sort out your past. I'll be there tomorrow if you like." Marina noticed the change in his expression. "It's him, isn't it, the man you left in Portland?" Victoria showed her the message. Marina read it and let out an admiring sigh. "That's the kind of love I always wanted you to find, Vic. Someone who loves you not in spite of your faults, but with them. I almost threw it all away because of an idealized memory," Victoria confessed, feeling the tears forming again. "But you didn't." Marina took her hand across the table. "You're here, facing your demons, trying to make things right. That counts for something." That afternoon, Marina took Victoria to see her department at the hospital, seeing her old friend in her element. Competent, respected, making a difference to the lives of sick children, brought a new dimension of regret and admiration. "Michael is on duty today," Marina commented as she showed him around the pediatric ward. "Would you like to meet him?" Meeting Michael Brennan was surprisingly natural. He was a tall man with kind eyes and an easy smile, who clearly adored Marina. Watching them together made Victoria realize how much time she had wasted living trapped in her own illusions. "Marina has told me a lot about you in the last few hours," Michael commented over a quick coffee in the hospital cafeteria. "About the past, but also about how you had the courage to come here." "I don't even know if I can call it courage," Victoria replied. "It's more like the need to survive. Sometimes they're the same thing." He smiled, sharing a complicit look with Marina. When Alexander arrived the next day, Victoria met him in the lobby of the Thompson Hotel. Seeing him there, with his clothes slightly crumpled from the trip and eyes full of worry, made her heart ache in a different way. "I'm sorry I ran away," she said, hugging him. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about your memories before," he replied, kissing her forehead. Marina and Michael invited them to dinner that evening in their apartment overlooking Lake Union. Watching the two couples interact, Victoria felt a strange sense of peace here, where 4 people who had been touched by the same story of betrayal, but who had found ways to grow through the pain. "So what's the next step?" Alexander asked as they walked back to the hotel hand in hand through the Seattle night. "I think we need to redesign our marriage," Victoria replied after a moment. "Not as a continuation of what we had before, but as something new, something based on who we really are, with Marina as godmother," he suggested softly. Victoria stopped walking, looking at him in surprise. "Do you really think?" "She told me this afternoon. Does she like that?" Alexander smiled. "Apparently you two have had some deep conversations over the last few days." That night, lying in Alexander's arms, Victoria reflected on how people can carry different versions of the same story. Her romantic fantasy about Richard had been just that, a fantasy created to escape guilt and pain. The real love story was there, with a man who loved her enough to let her face her demons and still be by her side. When the dust settled, Victoria woke to the soft sound of rain beating against the window of the Thompson Hotel. Seattle seemed wrapped in a gray blanket that perfectly matched her contemplative mood. Alexander was still asleep beside her, his serene face revealing a confidence that she was only just beginning to fully understand. The night before with Marina and Michael had changed something fundamental inside her, seeing her former best friend not only survive the betrayal, but flourish beyond it had awakened in Victoria a burning desire to do things the right way. This time her phone vibrated with a message from Grace. "How's everything going over there, little sis?" Victoria smiled, realizing that for the first time in days, she had an honest answer to give. "I'm learning to accept all versions of myself," she typed back. "It's scary but liberating." Alexander woke up as she finished replying, his blue eyes meeting hers with that unique blend of understanding and love that always disarmed her. "Good morning," he murmured, reaching out to touch her face. "Already making plans for today?" "Actually," Victoria hesitated. "Marina invited me to help her with some of her wedding preparations. Apparently she and Michael have decided to move the date forward." Alexander sat up in bed, fully awake now. "And how do you feel about that?" "Honestly, it feels like some kind of cosmic poetry, helping to plan the wedding of the woman whose first marriage I helped destroy." "Or maybe," Alexander suggested gently, "it's the universe offering you all a chance to heal." 2 hours later, Victoria met Marina at a bridal boutique in the historic district of Pioneer Square. The place was an elegant studio housed in an old exposed brick building with tall windows that let in natural light, filtered by the persistent rain. "I thought a lot about last night," Marina said as she leafed through a catalog of dresses, "about how sometimes we need to break down completely in order to rebuild ourselves in a truer way." Victoria watched her former friend try on different dresses, offering honest opinions and sharing moments of laughter that seemed like distant echoes of their former intimacy. It was different now, more mature, more conscious, but still meaningful. Over lunch in a small French cafe nearby, Marina surprised Victoria with a question. "Did you ever think that maybe you needed to go through all this, the accident, to recovered memories, even the escape to Newport, to finally forgive yourself?" Victoria stirred her salad, considering her words. "I think I needed to face the ugliest version of myself in order to accept the person I've become." "And what person is that?" "Someone who still makes mistakes, but doesn't run away from them anymore," Victoria replied, realizing the truth in her own words. "Someone who finally understands that real love isn't about perfect fantasies or idealized first loves." After lunch, as they walked through the city, Marina shared her own moments of doubt and growth, how she had considered leaving medicine after her divorce from Richard, how meeting Michael in a particularly difficult emergency had reignited her passion for the profession and for life. "Do you know what Michael told me when I told him about our past?" Marina asked, pausing to watch the movement in Pike Place Market. "He said that sometimes we need to lose something precious to learn to value what really matters." Victoria thought of Alexander, of how he had patiently waited for her to find her own way back to the truth. "I think I finally understand what mature love is," she admitted. "It's not about overwhelming passion or romantic destiny. It's about choosing someone every day, even knowing their worst aspects in the evening." When Victoria returned to the hotel, she found Alexander working on his laptop in a lobby. He looked up when he saw her, and his smile lit up something inside her. "Can we reschedule our wedding?" she asked without preamble, taking a seat next to him. "Not to escape the past, but to celebrate who we've become." Alexander closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. "Do you have any ideas in mind?" "Yes." Victoria smiled, feeling a certainty she had never experienced before. "I want something small. Real, something that celebrates not only our love, but also the power of healing and forgiveness." That night, lying in bed at the hotel, Victoria reflected on how her search for an idealized love had almost made her miss out on the real love that was right in front of her. Her phone vibrated with a message from Richard. "Marina told me about today. I'm glad you found a way back to each other," Victoria replied simply. "Thank you for helping me to see the truth in Newport. Sometimes we have to face our ghosts in order to move on." When Alexander returned from the shower, he found Victoria making notes in her notebook, planning our new start. He asked, taking a seat next to her. "Actually, I'm writing a letter to my past self," she explained, about how sometimes we need to lose ourselves completely in order to really find ourselves. Alexander hugged her from behind, and together they watched the lights of Seattle shining through the window. The city that had witnessed her reconciliation with Marina would now be the stage for her new beginning with Alexander. "Marina asked me to be godmother at her wedding," Victoria commented softly, "and I said yes." Seattle's transformation during the fall was breathtaking, with the golden leaves dancing on the historic streets and the air full of possibilities. 3 months had passed since that revelatory week, and Victoria found herself back in the city, this time for a very different purpose. The Four Seasons Hotel was buzzing with preparations for Marina and Michael's wedding. Victoria, as matron of honor, watched the florists working on the arrangements of white dahlias and champagne roses, the same flowers she and Marina had chosen together that rainy afternoon in the flower shop. "Is everything perfect?" asked Alexander, hugging her from behind, as they admired the ballroom overlooking the bay. "More than perfect," Victoria replied, leaning back against him. "It's surreal to think how we got here. The last few weeks have been a healing journey for everyone." Victoria and Alexander had returned to Portland, where they began their own couples therapy, determined to build a solid foundation for their future. Their own wedding was now planned for the following spring, an intimate celebration in the gardens of Pittock Mansion. In the bridal suite, Marina was radiant in her Italian silk dress, while Victoria adjusted her veil. "Remember when we were nursing cadets and planned our imaginary weddings?" Marina asked, her eyes meeting Victoria's in the mirror. "You always said you wanted something elegant and simple." Victoria smiled, remembering those nights of studying interrupted by romantic dreams. "And you wanted an epic love story?" Marina added, turning to face her. "I think we both got exactly what we needed, not what we thought we wanted." The moment was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Grace, who had flown in from Boston to attend the celebration. "Richard has just arrived," she announced softly. Victoria felt her heart speed up slightly, not from love or desire, but from the realization of how much everyone had grown. Richard had brought his new girlfriend, a literature professor, who made him smile in a way that Victoria never could. The ceremony was conducted in the hotel's hanging garden, with the Space Needle framed by Seattle's surprisingly clear sky. Michael waited at the improbable altar, his eyes shining, as he watched Marina walk towards him. Victoria, in her teal dress, felt tears welling up as she watched her rediscovered friend experience her moment of happiness. During the reception, Victoria found a quiet moment on the terrace. Alexander joined her, bringing 2 glasses of champagne. "You know what I realized?" she asked, accepting the glass. "That accident that gave me back my memories wasn't a curse, it was a gift. It forced me to face who I really was and allowed me to choose who I wanted to become." Alexander kissed her softly. "You were always extraordinary, Victoria, even when you were lost." The party continued into the night, with Marina and Michael sharing their first dance to Etta James. At last, Victoria watched the couple, feeling a deep peace as she saw how fate had woven their paths in unexpected ways. Richard approached her during the evening, his girlfriend Rebecca chatting animatedly with Grace across the hall. "Glad to see you happy," he said simply. "Likewise," Victoria replied, and for the first time, there was no pain or regret in her words, only acceptance and gratitude for the part they had each played in each other's journey. When Marina threw the bouquet, it was Grace who caught it, provoking laughter and applause. Victoria hugged her sister, grateful for her unconditional support during all those years of confusion and self-discovery. At the end of the evening, as the last guests were saying goodbye, Marina pulled Victoria into a tight hug. "Thank you for coming back into my life," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me back in," Victoria replied, her voice laced with emotion. Back in the hotel room, Victoria and Alexander sat on the balcony watching the city lights. Their fingers played with the engagement ring, no longer a burden, but a symbol of true love and growth. "Our story didn't start out like a fairy tale," she reflected, "but maybe it's all the more special because of that." Alexander intertwined his fingers in hers. "The best stories are those that teach us something about ourselves." The next morning, before they left for Portland, Victoria left a gift in Marina's suite, a photo album documenting their friendship over the years, including the new memories they were creating. On the last page, she wrote, "To Marina and Michael, sometimes we need to lose ourselves completely to find our true north. Thank you for showing me that real love is not about perfection, but about forgiveness, growth, and daily choices. May your life together be as beautiful as the lesson of love you have taught me. With eternal love, Victoria." Autumn in Seattle had been the perfect setting for this chapter in their lives, a season of transformation and renewal. As the plane took off, carrying Victoria and Alexander back home, she knew that she had finally found her true love story, not in the pages of an idealized novel, but in the complex and beautiful reality of accepting oneself and being accepted completely.